I hereby call to order the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Ojai for September 4th, 2024. And Sherry, could we have a roll call, please?
Chair Quilisi,
Here?
Vice Chair Trent,
Here.
Commissioner Bennett,
Here.
Commissioner Murphy,
Here.
and one vacancy.
One vacancy.
Still.
Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Bennett, if you'd lead us, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Any need for changes to the agenda, Lucas?
Nope.
Okay, then we'll move on to public communications. The time set aside during our meetings for members of the public to discuss items of city business that are not on the agenda. Do we have anyone here present who wishes to speak during general public communications? Sherry, do we have any raised hands out there in television land?
No.
All right. Then we will move on to the consent item, which is the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission for August 2nd. And I have to say here, I made an error during that meeting in my rulings, and I have tried to correct it in the minutes. If you go to page 3 of 4 in the minutes, I think it's page 3. Yes, where it says Commissioner Bennett asked for a reconsideration of the motion, and what happened was we asked Commissioner Murphy, thinking she was the seconder of the motion, if she was amenable to a friendly amendment. The maker of the motion, Commissioner Bennett, was amenable to a friendly amendment, but the person that we thought had seconded the motion was not. And so we wound up with Commissioner Bennett making an alternate motion, which was seconded by Commissioner Trent and passed. But the request should not have happened because, as Vice Chair Trent pointed out during the meeting, and I completely missed it, he in fact seconded the original motion. And so a request for reconsideration by Commissioner Bennett, which was entirely in order and proper, should never have been necessary because he was amenable to a friendly amendment. We never asked Vice Chair Trent, the actual seconder of the motion, if he was amenable to a friendly amendment. And so we got caught up in the need to do it over again. And so that was the correction that I suggested to Sherry in the minutes to clarify that we in fact wound up doing a substitute motion, but it should not have been necessary. So.
The result was the same,
Yeah.
right? So I think
The result was the same, but the process was very different. And the minutes are supposed to reflect what actually happened in the meeting. When I read the original version of the minutes, I went back and I watched the last 15 minutes of the meeting, whatever it was, about that period of time, to understand exactly what happened. And my apologies to Vice Chair Trent.
No, it's all right.
Should have been listening when he said, I seconded that motion, and I didn't. So I think the revised, well, it says, Commissioner Bennett asked for reconsideration of the previous motion, And then Commissioner Bennett moved, and I seconded for purpose of discussion the substitute motion, which we passed, but it should not have been necessary. So I would propose that amendment to the minutes, which I otherwise found perfectly in concert with what happened at the meeting.
I thank the chair. Actually, at the time it happened, I thought things were a bit scrambled there.
They were.
But they all turned out in an
Yeah.
acceptable fashion to me.
Yes.
And so I stepped back from trying to get the clarified.
Trying to get the chair's attention about his incorrect ruling, yes. Anyway,
I move that we accept the minutes as amended.
okay,
I'll second.
very good. Any more discussion? Sherry, could we call the roll on item 1, please?
Murphy,
Yes.
Bennett,
Yes.
Trent,
Yes.
Quillisi.
Yes. Thank you all. All right, disclosure of site visits and ex parte contacts. We have a general discussion of the land use element tonight, but with 2 specific examples as discussion points. Two neighborhoods. And has anyone been to visit them?
Yes. I have visited both neighborhoods and had no ex parte contacts.
Okay,
Visited both neighborhoods, and I had a conversation with one of the homeowners there, or actually business owner there.
on Montgomery or on Fulton?
Sorry, on Montgomery.
Okay,
I've not talked to anyone about it, but I've certainly driven up and down both roads in the
Okay.
past 2
very
weeks.
good. And I have walked to both neighborhoods and have had no ex parte contacts. So let's move on to item 2, a discussion item in 2 parts, a general plan update and findings regarding proposed land use designated areas analyzed for proposed land use modification. Take it away, Lucas.
Thank you, Chair Quillisi. So tonight, I just want to start off by making this bold statement. No decisions are being made tonight. Instead, what we're doing is I anticipate a very healthy discussion regarding 2 areas within the city of Ojai, one along North Montgomery Street, and then the other area is a newly kind of discovered area for discussion, which is South Fulton. I want to give a little bit of background for both of these and then talk about some of the policy pieces and then kind of talk about the fact that there was actually 2 more areas that were in discussion for potential change, but both of those ended up not moving forward with some council consideration and determinations that were made back in February of this year. And then I want to end with some residential pieces and cautionary tales that I think this body has been a party to and certainly has been educated on last year. And I anticipate that with new regulations regarding residential housing law, we'll get a refresher in the coming months. So, background regarding Montgomery Street. This body has actually seen this before. We have had this discussion, this healthy discussion.
Years ago.
It was a couple years ago. And it was including this area, and then there was a secondary area which eventually ended up getting squashed. But this area has continued to be of high interest with the 13 other property owners that reside within this area. The area itself is commercial general or general commercial from a land use standpoint, from a general plan standpoint. I think it's important that we're talking within the context of the general plan first before we start talking about anything that's consistent from a zoning standpoint. Land use is really what drives the way in which zoning zoning functions. So it's always important that we talk land use first and then have the rest of the zoning pieces fall into place after we've had some of those discussions, right? Some of the possible land use considerations for North Montgomery, I'm just throwing these out for discussion. Nothing is cemented here, healthy discussion. Village mixed use would be one of them, as well as single-family residential. Single-family residential is kind of a broad perspective from a land use standpoint, and
Many zonings fall within that.
well, pause, not zonings, land use designations.
Yes.
There's several land use designations that fall within that. And then through those land use designations, we look for zoning that is consistent and compatible with those, right? So once again, the foundation by which we're working from is the land use designation. And then from there, because I know we tend to jump into zoning because that's really what we focus on. And then through findings, through various projects, then we start leaning into the policy and goals and the pieces that fall into place for whether or not a project is supported by this body, right? So that's kind of some of the history. I would also just give a little bit more, lean into the history a little bit more, and identify that this area at one point I had met with several of the property owners within this area, and it was really kind of at the height of the pandemic. I was in the backyard with probably 13 or 15 individuals, all property owners or business owners within this area, and all expressing concerns regarding the nonconformities that exist with the C1, which in this case, sorry, I'm doing the same thing, the general commercial designation
Right.
For this area, and the struggles that they have with free financing, which our code doesn't necessarily hit on that, but it's certainly something that we should always be aware of, refinancing or looking at potentially
just
selling the
sales,
property.
just sale
it
of
just
property.
becomes a red flag for anybody that's looking to purchase a property. So it's kind of a hindrance, but through the existing uses on the ground, there is inconsistency with the way in which the land use is being identified. Now, I went back to the Wayback Train to see, we have some land use maps that date back to the 80s and even further, if they're still kind of tattered but still readable. 97 is when this land use popped up as an area for consideration. In 2004 is really when it was solidified, when we did a fairly heavy lift regarding the Ojai Municipal Code update to the zoning code.
Title
So when
10,
all
yeah.
that came into place, it really came to the forefront regarding the general commercial designation here, or what's also referred to as the C1. Both of those are in comparison. The C1 is the zoning, obviously the
General
land use
commercial, yeah.
piece.
Were you able to determine when general commercial land use designation was put on those
it
properties?
looks like it was in 97.
97.
So that's what I'm seeing. So it's been in place for quite some time. In terms of talking to the property owners within that area, they had identified that there was an idea, a perspective of turning this area, these 13 lots, however many they could end up having developed, into more of a tourist type of hotel, motel scenario along that stretch of Montgomery. So because of that, the C1 or the general commercial is what really continued to stay kind of ground level for this area moving forward. But over the years, there wasn't a push for that moving forward. I would say after 2004, it seems like that's all but died by the wayside. So we're left with a general plan land use designation of commercial general that has a lot of inconsistencies. In the staff report, I also included attachments that really kind of feed into the types of land uses that are consistent, the types of land uses that are inconsistent. And there's a yes or no chart that you're seeing there. On the right-hand side, the vast majority are inconsistency, right? There's a couple that are, obviously, with the retails that we've got along that stretch. So that works. But there are also
Mostly not consistent.
duplexes and other
Yeah,
types of uses
right.
that are inconsistent.
There's, why are the retail or the service, there's a chiropractor. Why would that not be consistent with commercial?
No, it is. That the chiropractic use is consistent. However, or is it not? Are you seeing something
It says
different?
no. And I'm like, why? There's,
Well, it's because it's live work.
Oh, the live work aspect.
Live in general
There's-
commercial is not permitted.
Yeah.
oh, because live is
It
allowed. They
includes-
don't live, but
It
it's
includes the
allowed.
residential aspect. Because it includes the residential aspect, C1 does not allow for residential, period.
But those are not live
Period.
in businesses.
Even if there's a residential use that's on site, whether or not it's being occupied or being used, it's considered a live work. And that's the way in which, like for instance, that example, it has a residential aspect tied to it. So because of that, it becomes either a mixed use or it becomes live work. And neither one of those within the C1 are uses that are allowed. Now, if you're going to ask me the next question, why not? I think the simple answer is C1 is really meant to be those sales tax generating types of uses or tourism generating types of uses, period. You see that all along Ojai Avenue. For some reason, they thought that North Montgomery would be a great opportunity 30 years ago for this as well.
So it was
I'm
a
pretty sure there's
residential,
no one living there.
and in 2004, you say?
Yeah, so in 2004, there was a fairly heavy lift regarding Ojai Municipal Code and having that significantly updated.
Yeah, if you go back through Title 10 and just kind of scan from place to place, at the end of every section, it says the provenance of that section.
Right.
And
Yeah.
a lot of them were changed in 2004.
Is the hotel motel use there SUNIDO?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And that's an allowed use.
And is the retail,
There's a,
what was at one point before us called Tipple and Ramble?
Tipple and Ramble on the west end side, yes.
Well, I think we
there's
saw
there's
on
also a
that
paper products
What?
business along there somewhere.
Yeah, just to the south of that, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny, we saw the evidence of the, the need to make these uses conform, because I remember in the Tipple and Ramble case, one of the neighbors said, I look out onto the space they have in the back, which they use for commercial purposes, and I thought, well, gee, that's that's a mess, and then now I see the mess right here.
Right,
It's
there
an
was
old- it's a-
also a residence in that building.
Yeah, this is all a residential neighborhood except for a couple of outliers.
Yeah, you're pointing to that that kind of chart that I threw together, right?
Right.
Like it is. It's kind of a hodgepodge of different types of uses. The interesting thing, like for instance, you just mentioned the printing and publishing, which is one of the uses on the west-hand side, within a building that looks kind of residential, single story. In the C1, not allowed. It's a use that is not allowed within the C1.
Oh, it's a retail business, but it's not allowed in general commercial?
Printing, if it falls into the category of printing and publishing, which I would say, because of its nature, does, it's just a non-conforming use that continues to operate.
Odd. Because we have the same thing on Ojai Avenue.
Yeah. So what I'm getting at is it's just an interesting scenario of uses when you drive up past Chaparral and you start entering this area. It feels like its own little world.
Yep.
I felt that way the first time I went up there and met with this group of individuals.
Could you tell me what the legal ramifications of changing this are. For example, I believe I read that if some property is vacant for 180 days, then it does not qualify to be non-compliant anymore. What happens if they put a property up for sale, like a private home that is non-compliant? Are they able to sell their private home and have it continue as non-compliant?
Shall I give an example? Hypothetical, if you will.
Well,
Yes, whatever.
what does the code say?
So it's 180 days. So for instance, if, let's just start with that as a baseline. If a use, which is non-conforming, they try to sell the property, maintain that use, but the property is sold and they don't maintain that use, and then come in for a business license after the 180 days, then that use is no longer allowed, meaning it reverts back to whatever uses are allowed within the C1, period. So
And
case
this
in
is-
point.
These things are non-compliant because they were existing at the time of the zoning, and so they're just grandfathered in, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
so
the
you can,
perfect term to use.
you can sell it and keep the grandfather,
Yeah, the purchase does not negate the use,
okay?
right? The non-continuation,
On-exercise of the
yeah,
use.
the non-exercising of the use is what can.
It's the 180 days that
Correct.
would mess it up. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
So touching on some of those pros and cons within this area, and then I'll pull away from, I'll go to the next slide. You know, eliminating the non-conforming status would be one piece that would potentially be a pro. Certainly within the code, it speaks quite a bit about getting rid of the non-conforming status sites. Existing use matching the land use designation, and really what that boils down to is whatever use is on that particular lot, having that land use as a complementary piece to that. So for instance, if it's multifamily, having something that has a multifamily use that's allowed. Right now, C1 says no to that, right? Other uses or
Unless
other land
there's
use
an SPL
designations.
overlay, which
Other land
changes
use
that, yeah.
designations could be an SPL overlay. SPL overlay could be village mixed use. It could be single family residential.
Yeah.
It could be any combination of those, right? The SPL overlay is an interesting piece. I don't necessarily want to talk about that just yet. And then obviously those residential uses will be retained. It's a generally low profile form of development. That feeds into really what our policies speak to. Low profile meaning single story, low density, intensity, that kind of thing. And that's really kind of what you see within this area. You're not seeing 2-3 stories here. You're seeing single story. If it is 2-story, it feels more single story. The 2 stories tucked in the back, right? So definitely complementary to what this surrounding neighborhood already has and focuses itself on.
Mhm.
And then confirms availability of legal residential use. So there's already residential users or multifamily or duplexes that are, like for instance, on the east side of North Montgomery, there's a handful of them, less than a handful of them on the right-hand side. So it's maintaining or confirms the availability of those uses moving forward. So for instance, and I'm not saying that this would happen because we're in an interesting time right now where rentals, as soon as they're up for rent, they're getting gobbled up almost immediately. But if we run into a situation, a downturn in the economy, and these rental units are remaining vacant for 180 days, what do they revert to? Not residential, only commercial uses. So there's some pros and cons to what we're talking about here. The pro would then be confirming those residential uses can be used and reused moving forward.
Lucas,
I'd
does
love
the...
to know what the red writing on that chart says.
Yeah, that's not legible.
I can't make it out.
Oh, here?
Yeah, it's
Under existing land use and also
commercial general,
possible land use consideration.
To the
mixed use, single family.
Yeah, it says commercial general next to existing land use, and then possible land use considerations, village mixed use, or single family residential, or, and this, we can have a discussion about this, overlay, specific overlay.
Lucas,
Now-
does the VMU classification include the kinds of businesses that are already existing?
With VMU, yes. I've taken a look at the VMU
Everything is,
use chart, and it jives.
okay,
VMU could be from general retail
all the way.
to exclusively residential and any mix in between,
Yeah,
or less.
our village mixed use as a land use designation and as a zoning regulation allows for single-family residential. I will say, and I've said this before, I think I said this in 2021 when we talked about this last time, it's very unusual. Typically with VMU, you get rid of the single-family residential and you're looking only at multifamily and above. Here, we're saying single-family is still okay,
Yeah.
recognizing that.
So question, you have up there a con to the land use change as if loss of future tax base for parcels. I'm assuming you're saying sales tax on the
Yeah.
commercial?
That would be if those uses which are identified as a zone or a land use as general commercial, immediately identifying that those instead are wholly residential. You're losing out on that potential tax base.
Right.
If they were ever to change hands and
Oh,
someone
if
could
it
say-
changed to strictly residential, then they'd be non-conforming in a different way.
Correct.
Or others would be non-conforming in a different way.
But I guess my question
But the
is.
businesses would still be paying taxes.
Yeah.
Businesses, I'm not talking about the businesses. I'm talking about the ones that are being considered non-conforming.
Right.
Like your residential or multifamily or duplexes that you're seeing there. At any point in time, those could easily be converted from a use standpoint to be consistent with the C1. But instead, they continue to be rented
Right.
long-term.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, so if we switch it to VMU, I mean, there's still potential there for tax base. I mean, there's still potential there for a business to run and
There would
have
be.
taxes on the sales tax.
If you were to go into that direction. The only reason why I was listing it as a con is because of the
Could
aspect if
potentially
it
happen.
was to change only to residential,
Yeah, and.
some form of residential.
And the vision back 30 years ago when they decided to do this area as a C1, did they have some master vision for that area? Like,
I
was
haven't
it-
been able to find a master vision. Only
was it gonna
folklore
be-
at this
Was it
point.
going to be like downtown Ojai or something like that?
No, I don't think it was going to be another downtown Ojai. What it did feel like, and hearing from the community that spoke,
Yeah.
it sounded like it was going to be more of like a hotel kind of row, where it was one developer looking to purchase properties and then create kind of a hotel motel area. Yeah.
That was off of Ojai Avenue.
Yeah.
Yep.
With revenue being the driver.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
That's probably enough questions for clarification from staff at the moment.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a request going forward on, when we do the pictures that we have here, the maps.
I was going to say, I have another fun slide, which then
Oh,
goes
okay.
into,
Yeah, there's.
Sorry?
which then goes into this.
That's even worse than I would want to. It's not better, but it gets to
Very
the
busy, I
issue.
know.
That's an illustration of that table that you have.
The maps that we have in here could use a compass rose on them, or at least the designation of where north is.
Oh,
They're not on there.
for what we're talking about here.
The other thing is, it would be nice to have the addresses on there, so as we're going back and forth and seeing the description, we can find the property. and-
Absolutely. We can, look, this is the great thing about having this discussion tonight, is I can build onto the record of what we're looking at tonight.
Right,
Absolutely. And that starts with something like this. I could even break this down even further.
yeah.
And there's more entertaining slides that have to do with the other neighborhood.
There are.
So the one that's 314 or 316, is that one location? Is that one
It's
property?
a duplex, so
Oh, it's a duplex,
Yeah.
okay.
You don't have it up over there?
Oh. You should be able.
Oh, yeah, the word duplex is there.
There we go.
Why is 302 former?
The solar electric is not in there anymore.
I know, there's a new business.
There is, but when I had done this, I had seen it as the solar. So you're right, it is a chiropractic business
Okay.
now. Yeah.
That's good.
So just a question, I apologize. The 314, 316, there's two on there. There's one in north and there's one in south. Is that all one property?
No, it's not. So the 314 to 316 is the address that was given when I looked it up. So it's a range.
Okay.
Likely the 314, because it's a duplex, is 314 and 315, and likely the North Montgomery Street, the SFR, is likely 316.
Okay. Got it.
Actually, it couldn't be 315. That wouldn't work.
No, that
'cause
would
it's
be on
gotta
the other
be
side
on
of the street,
opposite
yeah.
side.
Okay. And then, so the 314 is single family and then that one's a duplex. Okay. And I think that duplex is a converted church. I think it used to be a church.
There's one converted church along there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a medical office
just
now, but.
Closest to Oak, you think?
Just, yeah, exact, yeah, closest to Oak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it? Tipple and Ramble?
Yeah.
Oh,
Residential, yes, residential. It's a conversation that we had before this body a couple different times for that one. And there is residential on top, yes.
and then there's, okay, then that's single family.
Yeah, 315 is definitely mixed use, yeah.
Single family. So are those single families operating as businesses?
They are not.
They're not. Oh, wait, I apologize. You're right. Those are different.
Those two below, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. I have to say at this point, I think we've all seen some of the public comment that came in prior to the meeting, that came in by email or text or whatever. My take on it was that the general tone of it was, how can you be making decisions tonight when we don't have an updated version of the land use element to compare those decisions to? And my answer would be twofold. One is, we're not making any decisions tonight. Second is, I'm not sure how different this second administrative draft dated April is. I mean, there's a red line version there, but it's voluminous and kind of hard to read. But if you could give us a sense briefly of what kind of changes have come to this draft, which is not yet
Public.
enshrined in the law,
No, we're
compared
still
to the
tinkering.
old, I guess, 30-year-old.
Yeah, look, the general plan, and at least for the land use element that was adopted in 97,
97, okay, so 27 years ago.
is an award-winning land use element. I mean, it won awards, right?
Okay.
So obviously, and because of that, it has a bit of history to it. And on top of that, I think it's important to note that those policies have been before this body for discussion. And we've also discussed the possibility or even interest in changes to these. And I've been through these policies more times than I care to remember at this point. And I'm not seeing any drastic changes. In fact, what I'm seeing, the only drastic changes that we potentially could have seen, aside from the policy, which a policy then drives the way in which this land use is either modified or adopted or revised, would have been through some sort of potential overlay on Ojai Avenue or even some sort of use modifications along Bryant Street. And when we had that discussion with City Council in February, both of those were identified as not moving forward, right? And I think both of those were in response to what the community was seeing as potential solutions. To housing, and second to what's been going on along Bryant Street. Not necessary anymore. Housing's been resolved. we have a housing element that's addressing the 53 RENA number that we've been assigned for our 6th cycle. That's done. And then what's going along Bryant Street is going to be an ongoing discussion, right? It's kind of a wait and see. Let's see what ends up coming up. There's no rush. No rush at all.
But
From a policy standpoint, getting
Okay.
back to the policy standpoint, if you're comparing what was adopted and award-winning in 97 versus kind of what we're seeing today,
well, only we have seen it.
well, I'm sorry,
But-
what I have seen today and what I continue to tinker with, it's there, with the exception of enhancing some of the wording and bringing some of that up to date, I don't see really anything being changed within the policy standpoint. If anything, we're actually enhancing some of the protections that we're seeing that are going on currently.
So might I summarize by saying then that our discussions tonight are really based on the current legal version of the land use element from 97?
Yes. And I would even take it a step further and say, looking at the potential land use designation changes along both North Montgomery and then we'll talk about South Fulton, more so North Montgomery, there are existing policies and goals that already are complementing potentially some of these existing land uses that are identified. Now, this is boots on the street that are identified as being nonconforming and finding ways in which to mold those uses with what's already surrounding, which is kind of a VMU aspect, I guess, to a certain degree.
Part of the general Ojai ethos of get along with the neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all understand that village mixed use is a transitional land use designation and obviously complementing it through the zoning code.
Yeah.
Right? It's not meant to be a standalone, oh, we plop it here because it seems most appropriate. It's really as you transition from M1 or manufacturing to residential, you need something that allows for that transition to kind of flow, right?
Yeah. Something I think maybe a lot of people don't recognize or haven't even thought about because they haven't looked at the maps. The VMU land use and zoning, if you're talking about the center of town and moving north, the boundary of VMU is the middle of Eucalyptus Street.
Is it really? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So,
it's just this one little
and
spot
between
that's like-
Eucalyptus and Oak, and between Oak and Aliso, looks awfully single-family residential.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there's some multifamily in there, but that's what it looks like, but it's VMU. So,
Yeah, mixed use is
Okay.
kind of an interesting land use designation because it has this cyclical aspect to be a buzzword for about 5 to 8 years, and then it drops off, and then people talk about sustainability or something else that's going on, and then it comes back again. And I get a sense that I'm going to a conference at the end of this month, and I have a feeling we're going to be talking about mixed use again. Looking forward to it with a bunch of
Yeah.
planners.
well, village is an important part of that title.
It is. I
My
agree.
grandmother grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts, living over the plumbing store.
Yeah. It's a mixed use,
In a
live,
village.
work. It's that whole.
It's like, let's try to be Europe.
Or
It was
at
our
least
attempt.
New England.
Or
It was, yeah, it was America's attempt. Yeah. So anyway, that,
Okay,
Yeah, I
that-
hate to drag you back to February, but I
Sure.
think I missed that meeting when Bryant Street was, or Bryant Circle was discussed.
Bryant Circle was not discussed.
Oh,
at
it was
that
not
meeting.
discussed,
No,
okay.
it was Bryant Street that was discussed instead.
Okay.
Bryant Circle is its own MPD zoning and land use designation. It has its own.
Is it
little bucket.
manufacturing?
It is still manufacturing.
It
yes.
is still, that was my,
Yes.
that was my.
But it
question.
has a bit, 'cause it's more developed within that area than what we're seeing along the stretch, kind of the spine of Bryant Street.
yeah.
Right.
The existing uses there on Bryant Street are perhaps more diverse
Yeah.
than North Montgomery.
see that.
because there's single-family residences, but there's also a body shop and a veterinarian and a carpet store and
Right.
lots of strange.
Well, I'm
brewery.
thinking actually about Fulton, where there's also a bit of manufacturing, car repair,
Mhm,
things like
yes.
that.
East side of Fulton, we'll get to that, I guess, in a minute here. East side of Fulton has one land use and zoning, and the west side of Fulton is different.
Yep.
Oh,
The west side that looks like it's all residential, but there's actually some business in there,
Yeah.
right around Pearl and Fulton.
right, yep.
Right. The southern
So-
southern portion.
Yeah. Anyway, did you want to cover South Fulton now, or do you want to go? Do you
Let's-
wanna-
Do we do
Or-
anything with this?
Can we take some public comment on?
Yeah.
That's
North
what I'm
Woodbury.
wondering. Should we?
Yeah, I'd say let's
Because
do that
we've
now.
done one of the two neighborhoods.
Look, once we here's this is the wonderful thing about the discussion is that it can go in any direction. But everybody's been sitting here with popcorn listening to us, right? Let's
Yeah.
if they want to say something, have them come up here.
All right. Well, let's start with our single speaker card so far, Larry Steingold.
Oh, right over here.
Good evening. Larry Steingold, resident. Correcting spot zoning and no zoning and mistakes is a good thing. So organizing it, cleaning it up, gets rid of all the problems that have been created over 30, 40 years. So congratulations. Have the owners been informed that they may have to comply with VMU rules to neighbors in the back, like 20-foot if you convert this to VMU, do they now have to comply? Just a question, you don't have to answer.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll answer it.
Might
But I-
be
but-
non-conforming in a different
Okay,
way.
but this is my other question. Okay, I understand planning, non-conforming is like an anathema to planning, right? Because planning tries to organize and clean up and sort of. However, in your document, properties considered non-conforming to the Ojai municipal codes are viewed as the sites which are considered detrimental to the orderly and creative development and the general welfare of the community. Therefore, such non-conforming uses, structures should therefore be eliminated without unduly infringement upon constitutional rights of the affected property owners. But the whole purpose of having a lot of non-conforming businesses is to create that atmosphere of community, of a mix, of ununified chaos, like a funk zone, to have just different businesses growing up in a community like a small town. So cleaning it up and making it, I don't want to use the word sterile, but I will, like Columbia, Maryland, and some of these places are all very nice and they're all very organized. But it's too nice. It's like going to a pop-up town and seeing everything all looks alike. So a house with a doctor in it, or a store working out of a living room that's now been converted to.
More organized but less interesting, perhaps?
Right, like, to me, it's like New England, where you have a doctor in a house. However, if you go to Seattle and you find a doctor in a house, he's viewed as a quack. They need to be in a fancy stainless steel glass building. So I'm just thinking non-conforming, to me, is not such a bad thing, so long as it is somewhat organized. Do you see what I'm saying? And it's like that, so not shutting it, making it all one is great going forward. But that's fine. But the VMU, if you can clean up stationery, deli, and florist, they all require CUPs. I mean, these are businesses that you want to have. They're the only ones that are retail business why? You don't have to protect those businesses anymore, so that you can get rid of the CUPs on those. And regarding Fulton, the city has said, we want industrial land. We can't have housing on industrial land. We're going to have businesses on industrial land. So now you want to take industrial off the plate and convert it to residential, just so that everyone's aware on Fulton, which is okay. I think it makes sense.
Actually, the west side of Fulton, I think, is VMU, isn't it?
Right,
Yeah.
but some of it's industrial. Is it M1?
On the west side. No,
Are you trying
on
to
the
make
east
things
side.
M1 or less M1?
East side, it's a mix of residential
Right.
and industrial.
Right, you're trying to clean it up and make it all residential.
Yeah, there's no M1 or commercial manufacturing on the east side or on the west side. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, just the idea of cleaning it up is a good thing going forward, so good job.
Thank you, Larry. And Russell Is it Kuhn?
I think so. I can never pronounce it. I think it's Kuhn.
Kuhn. I would have expected an H in there
It
somewhere.
needs a couple of H's and a T or something. So anyway, hi, I'm Russell Kuhn. And John, thanks for telling me about this meeting. I appreciate it. I moved into the office about 3 years ago at 302. Hi, nice to see you, sweetie. How are you? Good. And I'm a chiropractor. We serve the community. We help all kinds of folks in the town, and I'm happy to be able to use it, essentially located to the town to serve the whole town. It's getting very challenging to run businesses in the town given how expensive everything is getting. So I feel lucky to have the building, but also the building that I'm working in is a house. I mean, it was built as a house. So to me, I've always thought that somebody lived in there. And there's some families over the years that said, oh, I used to come and play in this house 40 years ago or 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So some of the stories are lovely to think that children were playing where now I'm helping all these people. So to me, intuitively, I've always thought, well, it should at least be mixed use, and depending on the needs of the community at the time, it should be to serve the community either in a professional fashion or a retail fashion, or possibly the press of the need for housing in the town is anytime you can get another couple of houses that are eligible for families to live in. We don't have that many, and this one's already there, so it should feel like if the winds blow a certain way and at some point it would serve a family to raise children in there in our community, it feels like that should at least be an option. And there's 2 actual structures on my property, and one of them could serve as a small business in the back, and then another could be housing for both, just more places for people to live and walk, which is so healthy for all of us that we have this walkable downtown, and this is located right there. So to me, I've just always thought like this should at least be village mixed use to serve the needs of the community. So that's pretty much, and also Meg next door at Nutmegs over there, she's been waiting for this to change. When I moved in 3 years ago, she goes, oh, they're about to do it. And, and I was like, oh, great. And then 2 years ago, she's like, yeah, no, I think it's going to happen this year. And
You've heard the phrase, with all deliberate speed.
yes, yes. So my hope is, of course, deep consideration to how best to serve the community. Also understanding, I don't even know how you make anybody, all the people in this town happy based on their different opinions. Good luck with that. So giving allowance to the challenges that you guys face to make everybody happy, to me, it's very obvious that should be mixed use. And many people are hoping that the wheels will spin at some point.
Move a little more quickly.
Just a skosh, maybe within 10 or 20 years, it would be great. So anyway, thank you guys. So.
Thank you very much, sir.
And just to give Meg a plug, she is the one that organized the group that I met with a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And to be fair, at that point, let's not forget, that was a general plan at that time that we said, we're going to have this done in 18 months, right? So that was wishful thinking, obviously.
Yeah. And actually, I still have an administrative report dated February 9th, 2022. General plan update, draft land use. So
Yeah, I mean,
staff has been working on this for a while.
been working on it for a while. It just continues to evolve, and then it's evolving even as we speak right now.
Sorry, what year was that?
2022.
2 years ago.
No, the one you just talked about. Was it 2009 or?
No, that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But there was also, the one that's farther back in the book is dated May 13th, 1997.
That's the award-winning.
So it was 25 years between those two.
So we're getting there.
We're getting there, yeah. Baby steps.
I think Larry had a question.
Larry, you had a question?
Before Larry speaks, but you can come up here, Larry. You had asked whether or not we had notified the communities of South Fulton as well as North Montgomery, right? You had asked that question.
I would have asked that, but yes.
Yeah,
Specifically.
they have not been formally noticed yet, mainly because, and I just want to preface it with, this is meant to be a discussion with the commission, and then depending on where this goes, that's when we're going to be inviting the community to say, hey, this is kind of what we're thinking, kicking the tires. What do you think?
Okay. the pros, and my question is, if I'm an owner of a property that is now non-conforming, what is the downside of me agreeing to VMU? What is the plus side of VMU? If I'm a property that is conforming, but they're still not VMU, what is the plus and what is the negative? And I'll sit down.
It depends on the, yeah, it depends on the use. It gives, I would say this about VMU is it gives more flexibility than what C1. C1 is driven with, first and foremost with tax base. So it's an economic driver, 100%. If you're looking at each of these uses, they're all sales tax generators. Mm-hmm. You're not necessarily, you're getting some of that, well, most of that with VMU, but it expands out to other feelers and avenues that then give some creativity and some opportunity. I should also mention, and it was a part of my speech, but since we're in this discussion phase, if you move into a category that has residential, just know that you're putting yourself, the community, into a box where we lose some of that power. And what I mean
Power to
by
do
that,
what?
to enforce and to apply regulation, because now we're moving into the possibility of objective standards and less about subjective. If you catch my drift. So remember in October of last year when we had a robust discussion before we then had a couple of residential projects come forward, and then everybody got the shell shock of what density bonus really means by today's standards, which is much, much more than what anybody could have ever fathomed. We move into that category. C1 does not allow for residential, period. So that's your saving grace if you're saying no to more residential within this specific area, right? You can look at that as a pro or con. I'm just stating the facts here. Mm-hmm. If you're looking at an area where you want to see residential and potentially a higher density than what you would normally see, Bryant Street is an example, right? As an SPL overlay, they could have gone much larger than what they ended up going with, right? Could have gone more stories than what they ended up settling with, right? Same thing is true in this area. You end up identifying an area that allows for residential. You end up opening, I don't want to call it Pandora's box, but certainly a residential aspect that allows for more density.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Rena's folder.
Rena's, yeah, Rena's folder.
So, quick question.
Rena's folder. That's, I don't like, well, it's partially true.
And this goes back to kind of Larry's question as well. So if somebody is currently in this C1 zone or C1 land use, and we switch to VMU, does the VMU have different setback requirements and standards versus what the C1 has?
Let's take a look.
Height limits and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. So
There
meaning
are
that
some differences.
We could potentially put them in a position where now they're non-conforming in the VMU.
They're non-conforming in a different way.
Different way.
And I think the answer is yes, the standards are different, but something else that comes to mind, for me at least, is that if you have a single-family residence in an area that is residential land use and R0, R1/2, whatever zoning, then you can modify that single-family residence by right.
Right.
You might have to get a building permit, but nobody can stop you. On the other hand, if you have that same single-family residence in C1, in general commercial in C1, and you want to modify that residence, I don't know what hoops you have to jump through. If you have that same residence in VMU, it requires a DRP to change anything.
Right. Yeah. it's
And
not
that would
as-
be downside for a single-family residence owner if they were talking about changing from residential zoning to VMU.
Gotcha.
That would be a loss of some, not privileges necessarily, but it means you have to go ask permission
Right, you don't
to
have
do
this
certain things.
Sort of
And this body has seen a couple of village
We're not
mixed
talking
use.
about any residential that we would switch over. This is mostly, well, it's all commercial, isn't it? It's all-
No, it's not all commercial. On the east side of North Montgomery, there's a duplex and a couple single family. So yeah.
Impacted. Okay, gotcha. And then the
We
second
refer
question-
to them as quirks.
The second question, do we have any conditional use permits currently in those, with the businesses that are operating there?
The only one that I'm aware of is Tipple and Ramble.
Okay.
That would be the only one.
And if the property were to be changed to VMU from general commercial and C1, what's the status of that CUP?
The CUP remains in place. It doesn't change because the zoning changes. The only thing we would do in terms of recordation for the file, more than likely, is just update it through a memo saying that there was a zone change, or general plan designation, zone change, and
The CUP runs with the
CUP
property,
runs
but
with the property.
but it's still necessary?
Uh,
That's
is
the point of my
that's
question.
That's an excellent question. It would still remain as long as that use remains. So that use has specific conditions applied to it. And that's the way in which that would continue to operate. Now, if that use
And that might be consistent with a different land use, and it might not, but it stands.
it stands.
Cool. And you were
Okay.
gonna answer my question around the
Odd.
differences between
This is,
the VMU and the C1 with setbacks, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, the VMU versus C1. Is that what you're asking for? Okay. So for instance, for C1, the front yard setback is 10 feet. For the VMU, it's a median setback of 20 feet.
Okay.
What's that mean?
What's a median?
Front, that means.
Hold on. There's
20 feet.
an asterisk that says 8. Let's read
Median
8.
has a flavor of averaging different numbers.
Median setback, by definition through this, says includes all developed lots on the same street frontage and block and constitutes the midpoint of the front yard setback for all such developed lots.
Ah,
So we'd have to go, it's basically a survey that staff tends to do in situations like this, then ends up coming up with an average, is what it ends up being.
So an existing non-conforming single-family residence, if it was built to single-family residence standards back in the 90s, probably it's older than that, but I don't know, would probably have had a setback more like 40 feet.
Yeah, the RO4, RO2, RO1, those all have a 40-foot setback.
40-foot setback. So with 10 on the general commercial side and 40 on the residential side, anything that you do in between sounds like it's okay in VMU.
Yeah, there's typically a compromise that comes into play here. And that's kind of the way in
Not
which a
that
lot of
there's
these...
anything that's undeveloped along that block of North Montgomery anyway.
I think it just presents a
But-
problem when you try to sell it.
When you try to sell it, or if you want to redevelop it, you might run into some different kinds of rules.
Right.
Or you try to expand it, or you try to do something new.
Is there something besides the need for a DRP when you make a change? I guess you need to do a DRP if you're doing something in general commercial anyway, is that right?
General commercial, typically, yes, depending on what you're doing. If you're doing something interior, no. If you're doing something exterior, more than likely, yes.
Okay. And-
Here's the other thing I would
And if it were
say-
VMU, does the same dichotomy apply?
I would say it's more so on the yes side for changes or modifications. or
Interior
upgrades.
modifications in
Interior
VMU?
modifications are on the same page. Typically TI, tenant improvement types of permits. Across the board, that stuff is typically only handled through building and not through planning. Unless you're doing a change of use. then it tends to trigger some sort
Change
a
of
process.
use is always going to get the planning department involved.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Did you see the letter that we got today from Teal Row? I don't know who Teal Row is, but it says South Fulton and Bryant are zoned M1. This is a fact.
Part of South Fulton is, not all of
I
it.
didn't know that. And that was really the
Yeah, the east side is, yes.
yeah.
Zoned M1. It has
Zoned
a
M1.
land use designation. It's as important. Everybody assumes the zoning first, but let's not forget the land use is what dictates the zoning. So it's commercial manufacturing along the east side of South Fulton.
Right.
Yeah, her-
It's funny if you go a little further in that note. It says Ojai needs its manufacturing zone. Please reread the existing general plan. And I must say I'm a believer in that. And the development of those I think is much slower than you wind up with a 50 by 100 lot and you can plunk a house in it. It's pretty
Momentarily,
easy,
I
but
think.
these manufacturing lots are very often more complicated to develop. But nonetheless, the town at some point was looking at it and saying, we need a manufacturing zone and we need to protect it and expand it because we need economic development in our town.
At least preserve it, and we haven't done that.
Yeah, yes, and so, well, anyway, I thought,
Preserve, recognize. I think it's all of those pieces all
It's
wrapped
all
up
it.
into one. The general plan update provides for that platform to say, hey, where is your manufacturing? And we identified that early on, had a very robust discussion through the first workshop, when the visioning workshop, 2020, late 2020, I think. And it was virtual, 100% virtual, obviously during that time. And that was a really good opportunity for the community to kind of just start airing out some of the concerns and some of the ideas. And a lot of it centered around Bryant Street and Bryant Circle. More Bryant Street, less about South Fulton. South Fulton was kind of a late bloomer, and that really kind of came about during the joint meeting with City Council and the Planning Commission in April of last year.
And it's one of those historical quirks that it became commercial manufacturing land use when there were and still are existing single-family residences there.
So I get the sense that we're leaning into South Fulton. I have a couple of slides for South Fulton, if you want to.
Okay, well, I think we have another comment here about North Montgomery. Well, please come forward. We want you on the record.
Excellent. Russell Kuhn on the record. Kuhn, I think. So understanding that, my understanding was that when Sunita was developed, that as the hotel there, that they were pushing to make it into C1. So I'm not sure exactly when it became C1, and this idea that it was going to be a new little offshoot of a hotel, mini hotel strip. But again, meeting the needs of the town at the time of what's going on, it seems like for a long time it was residential until it became C1. And now we're finding our way back into VMU, which is like a balance point between the two. To me, again, seems like it can solve most things. And as far as the setbacks, is there a possibility of grandfathering in for people that were there or not? I don't understand what that would even look like.
All ordinances that are passed, unless they have a retroactivity clause in them, govern future behavior.
Right.
And so a particular structure or business or land use may be non-conforming today under general commercial,
Right.
and it might be non-conforming in a different way under VMU,
Right.
but still legal non-conforming, correct?
Based upon
I think that's the way it
recognizing that
works.
it's.
Oh, that's correct.
Okay, so they're recognizing that there's been a change made since the structure was built, and they're not penalizing the person who possesses that structure.
Right.
But if there was to be a big remodel or change.
But if the
Yeah.
person owning the structure wanted to do something different with it,
Right,
the rules for doing that might be different in general commercial than they are in VMU.
I see. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's just to put it,
No changes, it won't impact, but if you decide that
you.
you wanted to make a
you
change.
just hit what I was going to say.
Sorry.
It's not like if and when there was to be a change in the land use that would then impact the zoning, you wouldn't be getting a letter saying, "Ugh, your setback is different
You gotta
now."
tear that
Correct.
wall
You
down.
got to tear that wall down.
What? Yeah. Yeah, I just built it, yeah. So-
The other interesting thing about VMU that I think is important for this group to recognize is instead of going through some sort of a variance process, it has a different process referred to as the PDP, the Plan Development Permit process, which addresses any of the non-conforming pieces that you're potentially speaking to in terms of setback, maybe height, maybe lot coverage. All those pieces are parking. Parking always seems to be the big one that comes up anytime that you're changing a use. The plan development permit process is a way in which to address some of those aspects, recognizing that typically within that neighborhood or that area, it's not going to be all one specific zone or one specific use. Instead, the uses themselves are going to be different from lot to lot.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, again, I think we are all acknowledging flexibility is somewhat important based on what the needs of the town are, given the economy or which decade we're in. Yeah, obviously, we've seen great changes even in the last 10 or 15 years. So it just seems like if there's a way to build in some flexibility to meet the needs of the community, that would be best. But again, good luck with that. I have no idea, so. Thanks.
Thank you.
It's a tough choice because there are different rules
There are?
depending on how you change what you call that piece of property. Yeah.
And to Larry's point, I think that part of the charm of our town is driving up Signal Street and seeing the barber pole in a residential neighborhood.
How about the Duck Lady's house?
Yeah, exactly.
That's one of the, you haven't seen the Duck Lady's house?
Charming.
Oh, you must.
Very nice.
That is less than.
It's the second lot north of Aliso on the east side of Signal.
Take a walk by.
Yeah.
I did want to point
Yeah,
out too.
don't
that,
drive by, walk by.
You must walk.
To your point, Jamie, I think, Andrew Russell's point, we had different economic conditions back in '97. And I could see, during the '90s, there was a downturn. We had some issues here with our tourism. We didn't have quite the same tourism we have now. We had a lot of businesses closed down in town. So I could see where the community and the city wanted to try to find additional sources of income. We're in a different position now. I think we're doing pretty good. I think we're awash with TOT, and so we're doing fairly well in that aspect. And I don't know if we need more hotels, considering we're probably, when you look at hotel density, we have one of the most dense communities in this area, at least of Ventura County, as a number of hotels per square foot or per square mile versus cities like Ventura and Oxnard and et cetera. So we have a lot of hotels already. I don't know if we need more. So
On the other hand, if it were all VMU, people could put more hotels in if they wished.
potentially, yeah, understanding that it's been C1
As
for
general
so long.
commercial, they could put more hotels in if they wished.
They could too, yeah.
So-
Exactly. But anyway, what I'm saying is I think the flexibility is a key point that we need to look at, and I just don't see the same economic driver for having that C1 designation like we used to have, if that makes sense.
Well, a lot of the rules, or a lot of the effects of the change will be unnoticed because
It'll
you
take a
still have
while.
to do DRPs.
It'll take a while.
And you can still have many of the kinds of businesses in the VMU that you could in the C1, so.
I think Lucas hit it on the head when he said that opens the door for more residential, where C1 does not.
Right. On the other hand, I don't know that we want to say, okay, that parcel is gonna stay C1, but the parcel right next to it is gonna become RO 1/2.
Right,
And then the one next to that will be VMU.
right.
That would,
Kind of how it is.
that
right
would,
Yeah, that would not be my
Tedious and-
I would not be my recommendation in any circle that we'd be swimming in terms of a discussion.
now. Yeah.
Yeah, because that sounds more like spot zoning, which is difficult as it is to enforce, and it becomes a planner's nightmare essentially.
rumors about who you know, not what you know, would start to abound.
Yeah, that tends to be the case. Okay, so shall we? Any other questions before we can always come back to look. It doesn't mean we close the door to North.
Did you want feedback on this at all?
Yes.
I mean, other than our questions?
Absolutely. Look, it's almost like stump the teacher at this point. If there's questions that you have that I don't have answers to, I go back and I get those answers, right?
You're
Waiting.
I would
You-
just
you
like
opened the
to say-
door,
okay,
just
I
step
did-
through.
I did open that door. Here we go.
She's ready to
I just would like to express the opinion that I approve of the idea of changing this to VMU. I like the flexibility. This neighborhood has been pretty consistent for a long time, and I think it has worked very well for the city. So if making it VMU solidifies the ability of these people to continue to be a residence or to continue to be a live-work retail store, I think that's a good thing. I'm not going to say the same thing about Fulton.
VMU doesn't include manufacturing,
Yeah,
does it?
I don't think there's much in the way of manufacturing for VMU. I will say this: there was a use that came before this body at one point, which had manufacturing types of uses, and I want to say it was the ceramic store, which also had retail
Yeah.
and also had a showroom. So it was kind of a mix of all. So they weren't expanding the manufacturing piece. Ended up not even doing that project altogether. But
Or one could opine that the manufacturing was ancillary to the main use of the business, which was retail.
and that would I think that's what we.
That's
ended up
another
landing on.
loophole.
Right.
Is that over by Bart's Books?
Yeah.
Oh, got it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh.
yeah. That's VMU over there, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Got it.
Ancillary.
Ancillary.
Okay, I like that.
It's a planning word.
You read enough of this stuff, you pick up some of the lingo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I just before I go into South Fulton, I just want to look at the manufacturing pieces here real quick. That was the sense that I got as well.
These are all C1? I thought there was a couple that were not C1. All these on Montgomery.
Everything on that street is C1 right now.
Everything C1? Okay.
Just like everything on the east side of Fulton is M1.
Right, got it.
I gotta feed my kids. See you guys. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like storage and disposal of hazardous materials, obviously within the VMU that is not an allowed use. But within the M1 it is. It's fine there. Warehouse, wholesale, distribution, not allowed in the VMU. And the M1, that's fine. MPD, that's okay. C1, no. So from a manufacturing standpoint, I'm seeing a lot of no's on this allowed use chart for VMU. Yeah, okay. Let's move on to South Fulton.
Great. We have, in this case, 9 parcels.
Yep, this is
6
where we
of
were
which are non-conforming.
previously. Let's move on to the next one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have one last question
Okay.
on on the other property. The gentleman, Mr. Kuhn, said there were actually two structures on his property,
Which is where the solar, I think that's where the.
where solar electric used to
He
be.
bought the house behind, which is, what street is that?
Is that like a little apartment or something?
I don't know.
No,
It's
it's-
along
That oak?
Aliso.
Along Aliso, there's a house, and he has turned that into an ancillary building for his chiropractic offices.
Oh, okay.
Whatever he's using it for right now, it may or may not be conforming with general commercial. Is a doctor's office? That's really PL, I
We
think.
consider it professional services.
Yeah,
So
okay,
profession-
well.
Before I
and-
go into before I go into this, let me just look up, I looked it up earlier. Yeah, it's a permitted use within the C1 and within the VMU.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
That's good.
I was just curious, if that were residentially zoned, that second building could be an ADU,
Correct.
okay? Could that second building be an ADU if it were VMU,
If it was C1,
if it was C1? Or if it was VMU?
I'm not sure whether that, too bad Russell has left.
Well, it doesn't matter what it is, but there's a
I
second structure
don't know if that
there.
was two lots.
Pardon me?
I don't know
It's
if
not.
that was one or two lots.
unless he owns the lot directly to the east of that as well.
That's
more
what
along-
the
more along
the
Aliso.
lot that is behind his office, east.
East along the
on
north side of
Aliso.
Aliso.
I don't know whether that
Small-
was a
small structure.
separate, it's a house that they've turned into their office stuff, but I don't know if that was one property with two
Yeah.
houses.
I think
Well,
it's
I
all
was just
separate
asking the
property.
hypothetical.
Yeah.
If
So
if
you
that second
asked-
structure existed, what would be the rules about it?
So if he was trying to do an ADU on that C1, it would not be allowed.
Either in VMU or,
VMU is a yes. So a VMU, land use designation.
that's a good thing for the people
Translating
in,
that.
in what looks like residential areas that have ADUs.
Mhm.
Yeah. But general commercial, you can't have an ADU.
Well, you can't
Correct.
have residents at all, so.
Can't have residents at all, yeah.
The only residences that are allowed is emergency shelters and caretaker or employee quarters. That's it. So those are very,
Yes, could I point one thing out? C1 does allow ADUs if there's an existing residence.
Say that again?
oh, is that,
It
there's
is,
an
but
existing
Sherry, I
re-
didn't hear you. Say it again louder.
thank you. Say it again, Sherry.
If there's an existing residence in a C1 zone that's just being used for residents, they can add an ADU.
Okay.
Okay.
That would be consistent with state law then.
Yeehaw.
Yep.
Now, and it's still the same process, meaning it would all be ministerial?
Yes. Yeah, you wouldn't see this. Remember when you were seeing two-story ADUs? You can't see that anymore. I'm sorry. We've taken it. I didn't take that away.
We can't see a two-story
State,
ADUs?
you cannot.
Wow.
No, that is.
When did that happen?
We had this conversation
Yes,
like probably
that's right. The
6 months
ADU-ness
ago.
of it
Yeah.
overrides the two-storiness of it.
Yeah. Yep. Sorry.
And there'll be 32 more changes to the housing law by the time you catch your breath. Yeah.
As we speak.
Wow.
Okay, let's move on to South Fulton Street.
Must be nice.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so South Fulton Street, this item, I can't sit here and pretend that we've been talking about it for 3 years. We've only really been talking about it since April of last year. That's really when it first came to the table, and the council at that time during the joint meeting said, take a look at it, see what's going on down there. Didn't say anything like, let's make those changes, let's do it in this direction. Instead, they said, go back, do some research, bring it to this body, let's have a discussion, right? Let's talk it through. So that's what we're doing. We're having that discussion. I provided this body with some information. On top of that, I've gone through and given some pros and
Provided the
cons.
public with the same information.
Yes.
It's in the packet.
It's in the packet.
Yeah.
So the existing land use on the ground is manufacturing commercial. That then is consistent with our zoning, which is M1. Now, possible land use considerations would be potentially village mixed use. Is it not working?
Are you only talking about the east side of the
East side of
street?
Fulton.
Yep,
But-
we'll have like a
map.
kind of an aerial
You
showing
notice
it
it's
as
all
well.
even numbered
Well, it
addresses.
isn't though. 201.
Oh, 201 Bryant.
201 Bryant.
Oh.
So,
Well,
It's a through
201
lot. That
But I don't know
really
what that
isn't.
is.
Hold on. Let me get through this first.
okay.
201 Bryant is different. It's a different beast because that's a through lot. So,
What is a through lot?
well, I'll explain that. I don't want to explain it right now. Let me go through this first, and then I'll explain the through lot. Ask the question in about 5 minutes.
If I remember.
So, a couple of the possible land use considerations would be within this area, village mixed use and residential. I'm not saying a specific type of residential. It's really more just generally residential because there are residential uses currently on the ground that exist as residential are
6 of the 9 parcels are strictly residential.
strictly residential, exactly. Smaller lots and are residential. Some of the pros to the land use change include, eliminating the non-conforming use status, which is really what we were talking about before with the North Montgomery, having that existing use match the land use designation. So if we're talking single-family home that's being used as a single-family home, saying, okay, we will maintain that moving forward and giving it a designation that's justified. Residential use is then retained on site, as right now they're all non-conforming, and then generally low profile form of development. If you look along east, not necessarily so much west, the west side of South Fulton, it's single story throughout.
The west
So-
side of Fulton?
The west side of Fulton actually has 2-story buildings.
It does.
But on the
That
east
whole
side-
Sycamore Homes
Yeah.
is a mix of 1 and 2 story,
One and two
I think.
stories, but all along South Fulton on the east side, it's all single story.
Yeah.
So low profile. That's kind of what we're looking at using, maintaining, moving forward. So it has, and the low profile piece that's being plugged in here is really taken from the goals and policies embedded within the land use element, already existing. So it's identifying that those are some of the pros that exist within what we're talking about here. And then it's matching the residential use across Fulton, not necessarily in terms of its yes, in terms of its density, but not necessarily in terms of its form, because you're seeing 2-story on the west side of South Fulton, but single story on the east side. Some of the cons, you're losing some of that tax base for lots. And really, it's a tax base, but it's also that economic base piece. And what I mean by economic base, I'm talking about things that are producing jobs, which then fuel that economic development piece, right? Small or large, medium or small. I think all of those are important pieces across the board. So you're losing some of that if you're looking at any of those areas being potentially zoned to something else. You're fine. So then I was looking at some of the land use. So the lot dimensions within this area are very small. Smaller than what I was seeing on North Montgomery Street. And even with, like for instance, if we were to go to village mixed use, most of those lots would still be considered non-conforming in terms of their size and dimensions.
Oh, for minimum lot size, you mean?
Correct, which was an interesting piece when I did a deeper dive. So it is a con,
Okay.
but it's also just kind of the reality of when these lots were created and kind of,
Would be non-conforming for lot size, but the land use would become conforming.
correct. The use itself would become conforming, but then we'd still be within that era of the dimensions, the size, maintaining that non-conforming status. Not as like non-conforming with a lowercase n in terms of non-conforming, but still non-conforming nonetheless. There's provisions within our code that basically basically identify if those uses were, if the lot itself, we can identify when it was established, then it just basically reads as conforming. But it's still an exercise that we have to go through. And we've gone through that before in other areas within the city.
I don't recall anywhere where M1 was converted to
Not in
residential.
but it was
But-
residential areas where it was a non-conforming status in terms of
Yeah,
lot size
yeah.
and dimensions.
Now-
So,
You say loss of potential job producing designation.
correct.
Now, in a residential area, one can have a home business
Correct.
with a regular business
home
license.
occ, yes, a home occupation permit and having
Home
a home business,
occupation,
yes.
excuse me.
However, the job producing piece to that is assuming that that person is an individual and don't have employees coming to that house, thus creating more of a
Is that a restriction on a home occupation?
for home occupation. Yes,
It has to
It
be
would-
a single,
it would typically
Proprietor?
be. Yeah, the only time that you would see something that would maybe be against the grain would be someone doing piano lessons. So if you have your piano at your house and you're doing piano lessons, you can have one person come in and out. But in terms of having employees show up to your residence and having regular meetings there, home occupation permit doesn't have the latitude for that.
okay.
Now, you can certainly have your home business based there and then have an office space somewhere else.
Sure, with different zoning or
Correct.
land use. But, okay, if this were all converted to VMU, if the east side of Fulton, south of the commercial zone along Ojai Avenue, down to Pearl Street or down to the trail, I guess.
I'd say
That's
down
what
the
we're
trail.
talking about.
That's what we looked at, all the way down to the trail.
Then the 3 parcels that we're talking about here that currently have yeses on them would then be non-conforming.
Correct.
And what happens, but it's grandfathered non-conforming. They could be equipment lots or whatever they are right now,
Yeah.
and that's still okay.
And in that case, I would be looking at those 3 and saying those remain as general manufacturing and don't receive the same change.
So that's spot zoning?
Well, no, not necessarily spot zoning, because what you're doing is you're saying, can I go to the next slide?
Sure,
Okay.
do whatever you want.
Well, the reason why I wanted to go to the next slide is the 3 parcels that you were talking about specifically. Can you see my mouse here?
Mhm.
I think we're talking about this one here, this one down here, and
And
This
the through
one.
lot.
this one up here.
Where-
Certainly, if we're looking at any sort of changes, I would say no to any changes for the through lot, because it's already taking access off, a secondary access off of Fulton, as well as a primary off of Bryant Street.
Interesting.
So
That's a weird lot.
yeah, that was the fun thing about doing some of this stuff is I look back. This was done in the 90s. So there was a lot line adjustment that was done in the 90s that then allowed for
Yeah.
those 2 lots to
For
be
the-
opened up.
Aggregation of those 2 parcels?
Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
This is not unique to the city, though. There's a residence that I walked by this morning. It used to be 1001 Palomar. It's now 1000 Del Norte. The house didn't move. The lot, one end of the lot is on Del Norte, one end is on Palomar. And it's not the only one on Del Norte that has the front of the lot on Del Norte and the back of the lot on Palomar. There are others.
We can do that.
Those
If
are
we-
through
if we
lots,
do a
yeah.
lot split on our house, we would have 2 different addresses on 2 different streets.
Yeah. But that's what a through lot is. It has frontage on 2 different streets,
Okay.
not on a corner.
Not in a corner, right?
Corner is not a through lot,
Okay.
but it
Correct.
has front and back frontage on two different streets.
Are offices that have only residents using them, they're permitted in VMU
In office use?
for an office use.
Office use is permitted, yes.
But if you bring in, if I got this right, if you have a second person, one employee as opposed to one resident working at home is acceptable in a VMU, but you can't bring in one employee into that residence in a VMU.
Not for VMU. For if we were to identify a site that was single family, a single family land use,
All right.
if you fall into that category, not VMU, you fall into the category of a single family residential, and you're looking at a zone that's an R1 or an RO or any of the single family zoning designations,
All right.
then yes, you fall into that category. VMU does not. VMU has more latitude
All right.
in terms of how it operates. It doesn't have a home occupation. Home occupation is to say yes to having your business based out of your house, no to having everybody show up at your house to treat it as an office. It still maintains itself the status as a single family residence, but has the option from a tax base standpoint to be operating out of your home. If you want to do some sort of office work, you've got to have that relocated somewhere else.
Is that to our interest as a community in terms of economic development and the future of work?
For single family residences, I would say yes.
Single-family residence where
It's
you couldn't
consistent.
bring in one outside employee to work with you, let's say. Let's say you were part of you were a screenwriter and you were writing for a television show and you had a partner, and the partner would come over to your house to do the writing. That couldn't happen in an R1 zone.
No.
Okay.
No, because what it does is it lends itself to the opportunity for more. And single-family residence, and I would say in the cities that I've been a party to and have worked through the home occupation program and process, it's consistent across the board. Single-family residential is the one last protected, well, it was until we had ADUs, junior ADUs, SB 9 splits, tiny homes.
Right.
It's lost its luster from a single-family primary use standpoint, and now is leading itself into this multifamily without calling it multifamily at this point.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking about sort of the future of work and the future of work in Ojai, and we have we think of ourselves as a creative community, and working on entertainment virtually, and we also have the move towards virtual labor. I'm just wondering if we can't be more attractive as a place to locate,
Sit right there.
with work in that context. If you put the two together, that is, you allow in a single family home a room to be used by two people in employment.
Yeah, typically these home occupation permits, you're designating a room, and that room becomes your office. That could be your bedroom, that could be your living room.
Right.
By doing that, you're saying this is my office for you, not for your other 20 employees or 5 employees that you have. Instead, you have some other area where you meet if you're going to get a home occupation permit. That's not to say that doesn't happen. I'm sure that probably happens in this community where there are people meeting. Here's the thing, though. If they're doing that, more than likely we're finding out about it. It becomes a code case.
Well, if it's 20 people, I think you'd find out.
You're definitely going to
Yeah.
you're going to see it that way.
I think that maybe the underlying desire on the part of the city there was the same as when I used to have a townhouse in Redondo. I used one of the bedrooms as my office, away from another office that I had.
Yep.
And that was okay, as long as no customers and no other employees ever came to the house. So it was a matter of limiting non-residential traffic in a residential area, I think.
Right.
It's a good point.
But having a second home in your backyard with potentially 3 people in it is a socially positive thing, whereas having a home
So considered, yes.
where 1 or 2 people come and
Yes.
work with you in your own home.
Or a 3-story ADU in your backyard with 9 people living in it.
Depends on the needs of the
Yeah.
state.
Yeah, I would say those things are beyond what we could even
What we can
begin
affect.
to regulate.
Just a question on Fulton. We did get a little background on the history of Montgomery and it transitioning from a primarily residential neighborhood into kind of the C1, and it kind of went to this weird morphing of that use. With Fulton, do we have that same sort of history? Like, was it residential and then it went to C1 and then it?
It's very interesting. I went
I'm
back
sorry,
and
M1.
and because this was an area that I was unfamiliar with, so I really kind of got into the weeds on some of this and looked up some of the original case files for this. And what's interesting, aside from the lot line adjustment that happened for 201 Bryant Street, and then a proposal for a restaurant for 204 South Fulton, there really hasn't been anything of interest that's even come forward, aside from re-roofs that have been done. The single-family residentials have remained single-family residential from the time in which it seems like they were first built.
But were they
lot of-
built in a commercial manufacturing zone?
Now, going back to the 60s and 70s when these were first built
Yeah,
and
you-
under the permits through the county before
Yeah.
the city took over the permitting,
Yeah.
it looks like they were all single-family residential. Now, I can't tell you what the zone was back then because I don't have a map
Yeah.
that identifies it that way.
Odd that they
But in
would-
'97, it was identified as M1 or general manufacturing.
Right.
So it's not like this changed in 2004.
No.
The map from '97 shows it as general manufacturing. So the use itself or the underlying land use designation has been manufacturing. I get the sense that there was always this understanding that at some point
Yeah.
there would be something that
Right.
would then trigger the manufacturing
Shift.
areas and shift.
Yeah.
And it's providing for that opportunity.
I've-
It's just never manifested.
Yeah, I-
Residential
area.
lots have become too expensive for manufacturing organizations to buy them up and convert them, I think.
I guess, I don't know. I mean, I think the intent of this.
310 is actually not SFR.
Oh,
Oh, you're right. It's not. It's it's
It looks like an
storage.
outside
Apologies.
storage
It's just
lot,
a
yeah.
roof.
yeah, I'm just wondering
That's
if
my mistake.
the intent of that area was always commercial manufacturing, and if just these these residential homes just happened to be built there, which doesn't make sense. Or if it was just maybe they carved it out and then they put those, I'm just trying to figure out why these residential homes are in this commercial
What is south
manufacturing
of-
area.
They all look older than 30 years old to
Yeah.
me.
So then maybe it was a residential area, and then they just slapped a commercial
And they said,
stamp
let's
on it.
make this block manufacturing.
Right, and then eventually everybody will transition to manufacturing, because we need the income as the city, we need the labor, we need the market, that sort of thing.
We need the
It's
possibility.
a
We
fair.
need the possibility, yeah.
What is this, what's south of 310?
Sorry. What's south of 310 is the bike trail.
Is what?
The bike trail.
The bike trail. But, and then beyond that?
Oh, beyond that is once again it's general manufacturing.
Manufacturing.
Yep.
So this
It's
just
a vacant
extends-
land on the
it
That
south
one
was-
happens
side
to be
of
a
the
vacant
trail.
lot.
This just extends the manufacturing north bike.
Yeah, we were
lots.
bookending it at the trail, and then obviously the C1 or general commercial areas to the north. That was the bookends.
And then everything on Bryant right there, that's all commercial manufacturing too, right?
Yes.
Except for the single-family residence and the brewery.
That's a single-family residence?
There is one in there. Yes, sir.
Right, it's right.
Go walk it.
Well,
It's not
That's
here,
another,
it's actually further
another
up.
one of those artifacts. The residence itself, like the ones on the east side of Fulton, looks to be a good deal more than 30 years old.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, bless you.
Right. Oh, yeah,
So-
they're, I mean, these structures are original, so I would say they're original
Yeah.
in looking at them in
They're
terms of how
probably
they've been.
1950s, 1960s.
And a handful of them have, well, less than a handful of them have been renovated.
Mhm.
Somewhat recently.
Okay, interesting.
I like your flexibility in leaving the manufacturing, the commercial manufacturing where it is, but doing something with the residential uses. Now, if, it doesn't seem possible to me right now that any one of those commercial or manufacturing businesses like at 308 South Fulton, if they wanted to buy 212 South Fulton and expand their printing and publishing business, that would be immensely expensive. At least several $100,000 just for the ground, not to
Oh, yeah.
mention the development.
Have any of those single-family residents, have they wanted this change? Have they complained and said, hey, we want to make this VMU? No, haven't heard anything.
No.
Yeah, the only area
They're,
that,
they're legal non-conforming, and as long as nobody bothers them,
They're good
I
to go.
guess.
that'll be our next step, is to reach out to these members and,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
get their thoughts on it. No, this was just doing the
Doing the legwork.
the legwork here to see what really has gone on over the last. You're saying 30, I'd say over the last 50 years.
Yeah, oh, yeah, more than 30 for sure.
Yeah.
And we talked about upside and downside for various people. If someone in one of those current SFR parcels wanted to do something besides an ADU, which I think we all say, okay, that gets in the conversation, you're free to do whatever you want. But if somebody wanted to remodel, do they operate under M1 rules for remodeling, or do they operate under single-family residence rules for remodeling?
M1.
And are they
Yeah,
different?
it would be M1.
Okay,
So
they'd have
let's-
to go through a design review and,
Let's say they wanted to expand their single-family residential, and they wanted to go two-story,
not to build an ADU, but just to make a bigger house.
make a bigger house.
Yeah.
Guess what the answer is?
Answer is no, you can't do it.
You cannot expand a non-conforming use.
So a definite downside,
So it preserves the building as it exists. And as Sherry had mentioned, can you do an ADU?
ADU laws trump, excuse me for using that word, they outrank
Outrank, yes.
existing zoning.
But our non-conforming parameters certainly exist within any sort of expansion discussion. So even if they wanted to go single story within that, and they said, hey, we want to add a bedroom or we want to add a bathroom onto the side.
You can't do that in an M1 zone.
No.
Wow.
Oh, it's not because it's an M1 zone. It's because you're expanding a non-conforming use.
Correct.
Okay.
However, if they converted that use into something that was conforming and said, hey, I want to expand this building, then yes, let's go
Oh.
through the process.
I'm going to turn this into a little factory and I need to expand the factory.
Yep.
Then that works.
Correct.
But then I have to have a business permit for the factory,
Yeah, it's a
because I'm
business
converting
license.
it to a factory,
Correct.
and no doubt other things as well.
Yeah.
But if it were if it were VMU, would those single-family residences be non-conforming but in a different way?
No, VMU allows for single-family residential.
Yeah?
Yep.
And does it allow for expanding a single-family residence?
Yes.
Okay.
If you were to do that, it would require you to go through a design review permit. Even if it was
Oh,
single-story.
because it's VMU, not because it's a single-family residence.
Correct.
If it were a single-family residence in a residential land use area.
This is painful.
then-
Sorry.
This is
This
serious.
is my life. This is.
What did we get into?
People go to school for this.
Yeah, I know, people have. Did you?
For 4 years plus sometimes, yes.
Lucas did. And I think one of the series is going on for more.
On the East Coast, she's enjoying it.
Yeah. All right, so is there more to be said about Fulton? What do we think about, just in general, changing the land use and the zoning of the 6 of the 9 parcels that are currently 100% residential use
To
To VMU.
to VMU?
VMU.
But you would also change the commercial lots there as well, right, to VMU? So the commercial,
No,
No,
no.
what Lucas was proposing
oh, interesting.
was what
Yeah, not the
feels a lot like spot
Yeah,
zoning.
that's spot zoning.
That's
But
what I
it's-
said 10
no,
minutes ago.
No,
and
no,
y'all
no, no,
said
he says it's not spot zoning, it's carve-out zoning.
Carve out.
I don't know. If you were to do VMU, VMU is right across the street. So continuing the VMU across the street.
Oh,
Makes
expansion
sense.
of the VMU.
Correct.
As opposed to spot zoning in the manufacturing area.
Okay, so then they all become consistent. And we keep the 3 commercial properties as commercial. And it's not spot.
It would not be spot, because you would be maintaining what already is an existing. Look, these are just ideas,
Yeah, yeah.
but if we're
Sure.
talking about
Makes
this
sense.
Yeah,
as an
but
idea,
Now
at some
that-
point, we have to come to a consensus as to what we recommend to the city council, who in its sole discretion
No, I
will
don't
change
think.
the land use
Not at
and
this
zoning.
meeting.
No, he said just
Not at this
discussion.
meeting.
yeah, but I'm saying in
No,
the future.
at some point, we have to come to that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And that's the reason why we're having this kind of,
Learning
Ground
session.
truth.
And,
thing.
and because we've changed topics, I think we have another request for public comment on the second portion, on the second neighborhood in question. Is that correct, sir? Well, why don't you come forward and give us your thoughts?
Thank you. Larry Steingold. This looks a lot like where I came from in Rhode Island, where neighborhoods bump
Oh.
up against industrial, and they clean it up, but essentially they try to solve problems that were created 200 years ago.
Yeah.
Am I correct in assuming, well, correct in thinking, that 210 South Fulton and 212 South Fulton will now be wrapped around, industrial will be wrapped around them?
Yep,
The,
potentially.
Is that what is that correct?
I'm having a little trouble with the boundaries on there. It
Well, I
looks
mean,
like,
if-
it looks like
This is industrial.
some piece of the,
yep, printing and publishing and,
That's industrial, and then that up there is, these 2 houses are gonna be VMU?
that would be one of the ideas, yes.
So the industrial
So
will be wrapped around.
there's industrial behind
On
those
3 sides.
single-family residences.
3 sides,
Yeah, and on both sides.
on 3 sides.
on
So
3 sides, yeah.
That creates, to me, a problem if I'm a industrial guy and I wanna do something here, and these people are next door, they vote, I don't.
Yeah, the
Their
residential
codes are
piece-
different, sound laws are different, everything is different. So is there some way to rejigger that type of zoning where it's like, listen, we'll give you the VMU zoning because that's what you want, Mr. Homeowner, but the sound deal is this. And this is, what I'm saying is we're not gonna undo, they've been living with 65 decibels. Now you're going to 45, and you're gonna be screaming bloody murder because they're sitting there banging away at their,
Yeah,
scrapyard.
the noise, you're talking about the noise situation.
I'm talking about anything where the residential people have their kids and family out there and the guys there with an acetylene torch banging away and doing stuff.
How about a jackhammer?
Jackhammer,
Yeah.
anything
A
that's.
pile driver.
All I'm saying is, that crazy problem here for these people, I mean, it's just up there, whatever.
They already live with that.
Right, but now it's gonna be official. Now it's gonna
Now
be,
you're entitling them.
right, now you're entitling them, and now it's just, we get along with.
They're
it.
entitled to
What-
complain.
I bought the
Also-
house, it was.
The city has a
And they
noise
vote, yeah.
ordinance.
Correct.
Is it different from different land uses?
Oh, yeah.
It is between residential and other things.
Capri.
And
But-
VMU
We just
is
went through
this.
considered residential.
Is it different, is VMU noise ordinance different from residential? Is it different from
No, it's
manufacturing?
consistent. It's consistent with single-family residential, which has a stricter standard regarding noise. So he's correct in terms of it would be applying a stricter standard along the edges of the boundary of
And
like
if you-
210 and 212.
If you make it VMU, you're opening the door for more residential to come into
It's
that
like
area.
the same deal you made with Bill Wyrick with the 20 feet for the sound thing. It's like, you gotta cut a deal. It's
You're
like
talking about for, what was that
Love Cafe.
business? Love
it's like-
Love Social Cafe.
Right, I mean, if you want sound barrier, fine, you're gonna have to have a 30-foot setback, I mean, or build a wall or something. It's because these people are gonna torture they're gonna torture each other.
It is interesting. If you look at 204 and 210 and you just happen to walk past it, they don't feel like, I don't see a distinguishing fence that then borders it. And you're seeing it in this site plan.
Yeah,
This
it's-
aerial.
it looks
Oh,
like it.
is
It's
that-
very interesting. It blends together.
Is that area behind 210 and 212, is that part of 204? Or is that part of a commercial manufacturing?
Yeah, so there's
parcel.
a line. There's a line that's being drawn. If I can, my cursor pops up here. If you look
It's like
I
a whole
don't
neighborhood.
see it.
down
Oh,
here.
there it is.
Do you see it now? This is a line
Street.
for those residential
Right.
uses to the.
And just to the right of that, whose
There's no
parcel
fence.
is that?
And so this parcel here, this portion of this parcel is for 204.
Which is also a single-family residence.
Yeah, it is single family residence, but it also has like outdoor storage. You look at it, it doesn't feel like I mean, the house feels like single family residential, and there is no business license per se, but it looked.
They
when
have a
I-
lot of
When I
stuff.
drove by it, I was like, boy, that doesn't feel like single family, but it is. It's operating a single family that also has
An
kind of
odd,
on-site storage, which is completely allowed
In the
within the
commercial
M1
manufacturing.
or the general manufacturing.
And not in,
Not in-
Definitely
not
not.
in VMU?
Let's take a look. Storage as an outdoor use is not allowed within the VMU.
Oh, there you go.
somebody's going to be upset.
Yeah.
So it's something to think about. Different than what we were looking at for North Montgomery, right? Here, there are still reminiscences, even within these single-family residential use types of scenarios, where there is this outdoor storage piece.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's leaning more to the commercial manufacturing.
Well, people could be doing outdoor storage along North Montgomery too. We might not see it because it's in the backyard.
Right, which is
And
what's going
there's-
on here.
That's backyard behind other houses.
Completely hidden. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know it was there. Yeah. And I've walked that block a number of times.
Well, and even like as an example, 308 South Fulton and 310 South Fulton, cancel out the SFR. It's not single family residential. It's outdoor storage. It has an address of 310, but both of those lots are one and the same. There is no two lots.
Right.
All there is a chain link fence that separates the two.
Is it a single parcel?
It is a
with
single
two addresses?
Yeah, two addresses, single parcel.
Different businesses,
Yep.
owners, different,
Different owners. I mean, obviously it's the same property owner, but they've chosen
Two tenants.
to rent it out to two different tenants.
that's a really messed up block.
Is
And the question is, should
308A.
we
Look,
do anything about
here's-
it?
Yeah, what, and what do we
Here's
do
what I would
if that
say.
doesn't-
Here's what I
So
would
what?
say about. Hold on. I don't want to call it
Messed up.
using it. Does it have challenges? Sure, it's got some challenges. But here's the reality. A lot of the times, what happens with manufacturing, just as a use and as a tool, is it tends to look messy. It tends to look messy. That's just how manufacturing tends to look.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Unless you're looking at something where a city has created standards that cleans it up. And then it just looks boring at that point, right? It doesn't have the same kind of character. I would say this has character, 100%, right? This reminds me of the Midwest. Like when I used to go to when I went back to my family's house.
No fences.
And there's no, well, yeah, you get yelled at if you start putting a fence up.
Yeah.
But not only that, but like the brickyard is right next to like 20 houses, right? The brickyard is a heavy industrial use. Like there's a lot of things that go on there there's single family residential butted up right against it. There's no buffer zone.
Right.
It's just the way it is, which is kind of what's going on here, which tends to make me think that this has been here even longer. If I go back to the historic aerials, which I did not do, which is I'm going to do that now, I would venture to guess that this has been this way before 1950.
Yeah.
Maybe it was like workforce housing back in the day.
It could have been.
Well, the train track used to run right where the bike path is. That used to be a railroad track.
Yeah, there's a switching. We found that out recently that there was a switching station just to the east of that.
Railroad track ended at Fox.
Yeah.
So it didn't go all the way down.
That's where the packing house was.
Oh, okay. So it didn't go all the way down to here?
Does.
No.
Oh,
It
okay.
was extended by some mechanism I don't understand.
Okay. Because I know that they did manufacturing down here, and they would leverage that train track. But I'm sorry, you were gonna say something. Oh, Steve's got, yes. Gotcha.
Is this being done to protect the industrial or protect the residential? Just the idea, because the two houses in the middle, to me, are gonna be the biggest problem. I mean, just, the ones in the north, 110 Fulton, that's houses now, right?
I think the biggest thing is trying to fix the unconforming aspects of it.
Well, it's all industrial, it's gonna be all industrial and clean it
Right,
up, or.
But you've got single family in the industrial.
Right, and
They're
if you can
non-conforming.
figure out how to protect them and protect everybody from not creating a problem
That's kind of
tomorrow,
what, yeah, that's what this is all
from usage,
about.
That's the discussion.
sound, smells, odors, I mean.
Oh yeah, there's a whole host of things that comes with manufacturing, for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's what these residents, as a
Signed up for.
use, have signed up for and have maintained for 50 plus years.
Yeah, and some of them might have even wanted that. Like, ooh, yeah, I'm gonna get a factory in my backyard.
Well, and the other thing is this is a discussion. Staff's not sitting here saying fix this.
Right. And
Is
the
it something
residents-
that needs to be
and the
fixed, or is it
residents aren't
something where
even
we
saying,
say
fix it? Nobody's
let
saying
it
Well, I'm
continue
worried.
to?
I'm worried, frankly, about a developer coming in and saying, this manufacturing land is a lot cheaper than the residential land, and I have to put together a number of residential properties, knock them down and rebuild to get the kind of residential density, and there's a demand for it.
And the land price is lower because it's
But if you-
manufacturing
That's-
If
land.
you keep
That's
it
correct.
as manufacturing, they can't.
Oh, well, I used to, I had a cabinet maker and furniture maker who was down on South Fulton. I'm not sure exactly which of the buildings it was, but
Probably that 308 building, yeah.
it could have been 308. It could have been 3. Yeah, it's probably 308. But he had a lot of noisy equipment in his
Saws and sanders.
he had saws and sanders and planing machines, and he'd fire those puppies up and they make noise. But I was always surprised to see the residential all around it, and it's interesting. You aren't seeing people coming in and complaining about the sound in that neighborhood.
Well, let's ask, have you
Well, they
had
can't
any noise
complain. They're in
complaints
the they're
from
non-conforming.
these 6 residences?
Yeah, I've yet to see a complaint come in along South Fulton. Now, here's what has been coming in terms of co-compliance. There have been co-compliance issues, but not related to noise, related to items on the street for longer than 72 hours.
Oh, interesting.
That's a restriction on a residential area, but not on a manufacturing area?
It's a restriction along a public right-of-way area.
Any public right-of-way?
Correct. That's citywide, and it tends
Okay.
to be on South Fulton.
And so these are vehicles that have been left parked or vans?
Vehicles or trailers.
Trailers,
those-
left
those-
parked
Maybe
for
to
some
change
length
this
of
that
time.
isn't going to create new problems. I mean, it doesn't look like a clean fix is available.
I don't think a clean fix is completely available. What I would like to see is that we do whatever it takes to make the least hassle for the most people who occupy that space. And I don't know that we've determined what that is, but certainly in some respects, going from manufacturing to VMU, for example, you have a continuing requirement that you do design reviews if you want to change something. I think that's true of both of those land uses, like it would be for commercial. But there are going to be other things if you're in the VMU that has this residential flavor, that you're going to, under those conditions, you're going to be able to do other things that you might not be able to do in commercial manufacturing land use areas. Is that accurate, or is that not accurate?
Restate the question.
I'm saying if you change the commercial manufacturing land use and M1 zone to VMU, the requirement, which is a different requirement with the same effect, says you have to have a design review before you go making changes,
Correct.
which is
It'd be consistent.
more than you're gonna have to do if you change to residential.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd be residential completely surrounded by other land uses, none of which are strictly residential. But that would be the least hassle for the people that are in those single-family residential.
It's
parcels.
kind of within the same thread. I don't know if you remember the conversation we had for South Bryant for that SPL overlay for the 50-unit housing project when the concern was, shoot, now we've got residential coming in here, which is something that we're required to accommodate for as an SPL overlay. But now it's creating a potential quagmire effect, essentially, where now these residents can start complaining about the uses that are surrounding them. It's not a chicken or egg at that point. It becomes now that I'm here, I have the
You have to start
I have the
conforming
right
to
from a
me.
use and kind of zoning standpoint to say, not my backyard, right? So it starts to deter those types of uses from continuing, pushes them out. I get it. That was when I was looking at this, I was thinking the same thing. Oh, the solution is here's one of the solutions, do VMU. As soon as I started thinking about that, I started thinking through the scenarios of
Not
single
completely,
family.
you said.
Yeah, not so fast. These single family uses have now stricter rights, which is what Larry was alluding to, that put tighter constraints on something that maybe has been a use for 30 years, and suddenly they're being told that they can't do that. Or the use in which they're operating is becoming a nuisance, where it wasn't before.
So what do you do about that?
Leave it alone.
Excellent question. What do you do about that? That is the premise
Is
of the
there a
discussion.
planning and zoning
Let the sleepy dog lie.
alternative that says, you live here, you know what it's like,
Well, I think this
can't
is
start complaining because your zoning changed.
right. So we're getting into the piece of if you change zoning, does that then impact the future of what the surrounding areas can continue
Yeah.
to operate under. And I would turn it around and say, instead, what is it about our existing land use element and those goals and policies that exist are changes within this area in direct competition with those goals and policies? I ask that as a question for this commission to think about and ponder over, right, as we kind of continue this discussion, and recognize that I have already done the research, and there are policies that say and support this remaining and flourishing in a general manufacturing standpoint. There are also policies that talk about development that then begins to build on our economic base. And whether that's through the manufacturing vein or if that's through some sort of mixed use vein.
You're saying policies in the current and possibly the future
Yeah.
land use elements.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would say in general, I mean, we don't have a whole lot of commercial manufacturing in our town.
This is our pocket.
Yeah.
And we've got to
We've
protect
already
it.
lost a little bit of it with that overlay, which was a concern. So there's opportunity costs that I think we would be losing out on converting it. I like the overall concept of keeping the commercial manufacturing as is for those potential opportunities to open up in the future. Because we need to have some sort of manufacturing opportunities in Ojai, and we can't keep carving out, getting rid of them, if that makes sense.
Carve yourself right out of manufacturing at that point.
Exactly, and then we lose out on the opportunity to even have manufacturing.
Because you're potentially creating bubbles if you start looking at overlays. We had that discussion a couple years ago with the housing element.
Yeah.
Remember, at one point we were looking at the possibility of overlays within several areas within this area, within the manufacturing area,
Like south of the trail.
and ended up saying no to them, recognizing the potential impacts.
Yeah, and one of the big problems we've always had as a town is we don't have a whole lot of high-paying jobs here, so people have to commute out of town. So we have a big percentage of folks that live here and then they work out of town. And then we also have a percentage of folks that work here but live out of town. So I think we're making opportunities for those folks that work here and live in town, but we still haven't done much for building that economic base for the folks that work out of town. You know what I mean?
So there is a new element that the council has said yes to, which is the tourism management element,
Okay.
which also is a piece of economic diversification.
Okay.
Now, we're taking that budget back to city council and looking at the tools and technical documents that we're going to be using to help inform how that element ends up getting laid out, which is going to be kind of fun but also challenging at the same time, right?
Right.
Planners get to really geek out here, but also recognizing that there's a bigger piece to this as well, the driver, which is the tourism piece.
Right.
What are the impacts to that long term? And addressing those, but also recognizing, like you were just saying, which is what are the job pieces?
Yeah.
What's that gap that we're looking at?
Yeah, 'cause the
Are
service
there
industry-
pieces that are an opportunity,
Yeah.
given what we have already here within either the jurisdiction or boundaries of Ojai, or within kind of that valley area where it's an easier commute to come here than it is to go down the hill?
Yeah, and if we look at that, tourist engine, it's very service-based. It caters to kind of the lower paying jobs. So if that's the primary driver, then we're gonna keep getting ourselves in the same predicament that we're in now. You know what I mean? We're just gonna make the problem bigger, if that makes
Sure.
sense. Unless we expand our base of higher paying jobs somehow, which could happen with a manufacturing.
And it could happen through this element, through policy.
Yeah.
And then through policy ends up being some sort of implementation.
Yeah, like I'm thinking back, like there used to be, like I know lynda.com was here at one point. They had to move because they wanted to expand and we just didn't have the room, I think. There's a couple other businesses that have started here and have left because there just wasn't enough opportunities for employment
There
to
was
come in.
a light electronics manufacturing business here.
Yeah, okay, so there's been a few successful businesses here, but they all kind of outgrew the town and had to leave. So it'd be nice to, have something that can accommodate them, so they
Yeah.
will stay here, yeah. But,
Well, vacant land isn't necessarily something we have a lot of.
we don't have a lot of vacant land, no.
So
but-
we should protect what we have.
Yeah, we should. But like, for example, you have a single-family home in that area. If they are, if they sell their property, and then a manufacturer sees it for sale, and they come in and they say, yeah, let's tear it down and I'll build my new business here. It's a potential,
Is that potential? Yes.
yeah,
Hypothetical, sure.
hypothetical. But if we change the zone, then that we kind of limit our options there.
Or you lose out on that opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
But if I was to play devil's advocate, maybe it opens the door for something else.
Potentially.
There's two ways to look at that. Now,
Another tourism business.
well, and
Could argue
they're
that outlawing STRs
yeah.
drove the tourism business in a different direction.
Oh, that could be, yeah. True. Anyway, we digress.
Have we beaten this
I think so.
puppy to
I don't
death?
know.
No, I've enjoyed it, and I wouldn't enjoy watching a puppy being beaten.
Visions
You
of
know,
baby
I
seals.
guess I was very taken by this letter that, yeah, I think we need to protect manufacturing here because, among other things, it's a place where entrepreneurs can find themselves. And I do believe we need to be aware of the fact that, a virtual office situation, there are a lot of people up here who work in Los Angeles, who live in Los Angeles and work up here, or vice versa. And I think
That's a
being
killer.
accommodating that, as I understand it, our broadband situation is in process and moving in the right direction. But we need to look at what does it take to support a middle class that works virtually, and the entertainment industry is a natural place, although people here don't like the entertainment industry. They think of the west side of Los Angeles as being associated with it, but we're a naturally creative place. We have a lot of writers and artists and others, and so I think we really need an underlayment of this discussion of economic development and an analysis of that.
Maybe one of those single-family homes, maybe they want to sell it to a musician who wants to do a studio there.
Yeah.
There you go.
Would that be,
You need a bigger
is a
lot.
musical studio an allowed use in commercial manufacturing?
I would think it
Well,
would
there
be.
actually is one, but
Oh, how about a yoga studio? We hardly have any.
It
of
would be
those.
allowed. That would be allowed. Yoga
studio
studio.
would be very loud.
we're short of Pilates studios too.
I'm glad you brought the early part of Title X with you, with those land use tables, yes.
I have them here, yes, for a quick look. You're talking about a studio?
Yeah.
Yes, that would be allowed in the M1. And then what was the second one? You said, oh, yoga.
No, that's a joke.
Health and fitness facilities are a CUP.
But they're allowed with a CUP. Okay. What about,
Those are little tiny lots that we're talking about. Remember that while you're dreaming of studios.
some things don't require a lot of space.
You could have a small studio.
How about that tile business that you tangentially referred to before?
That's a permitted use.
That is a permitted use. So if I were painting and firing tiles, that's not considered manufacturing
Oh, were you talking about in the
in the
manufacturing?
VMU?
Oh, VMU. Sorry, VMU is. I thought we were talking about M1 or general
Yeah.
manufacturing. Is a no. It's a no. it's not allowed as a primary. Now,
As a primary, okay.
correct. Now, remember, we were talking about accessory or ancillary, right? The planning terms that we like to use. That is different because at that point, it becomes something that is not the driving force for that particular area, but instead is something that's complementary to what the primary is.
Yeah, okay. We ran into that with a business over on the west side of town. So, okay. Absent the existence of any beaten puppies, have we had a discussion that gives you, Lucas, any
Got what you need?
idea of which direction to move here?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm getting the sense that it sounds like North Montgomery has more legs than South Fulton.
Yes.
And I kind of got that sense when I was doing the research myself, because I started thinking through some of these scenarios that have come up tonight. And then hearing from the community just even before we start reaching out to the greater community, which is basically the property owners, that there's just not a lot of interest in that. Instead, it's, hey, let's maintain what we have and let's allow for that opportunity into the future. Maybe it's another 50 years before that
And
opportunity presents itself. But
It means some inconvenience for purely residential users of property in the area
It doesn't invite.
Hypothetical.
that are grandfathered in as non-conforming.
It doesn't
it's just
invite-
odd to me. I have yet to, and I keep up with co-compliance on a pretty regular basis. We're not getting complaints from those from those properties that are residential. So
There's one, well, there's one other
May have put a bullseye
aspect
on.
of that you might look into. Have a call to a realtor or two and see if any of those 6 single-family residences have been sold in the last
Recently.
20 years.
Yeah, I think
And if so, under what conditions?
Yeah, I vaguely remember seeing one of those homes for sale, and they were, they used the M1 as kind of a selling point, saying that there was opportunities, this is a great spot, you know, so
Sure.
I
You
don't
can
know.
live here and have a factory in the back end of the house?
You could be really loud. Live work.
the one piece that I haven't done a lot of research on is ownership of each of these lots. Meaning, is it the same owner that happens to own multiple lots? And I have
Or
not done.
How long have the owners owned the parcels?
Well, I do know that for a couple of them, and a couple of them have been since the 50s and 60s.
They have turned over in the last few years?
Have not turned over since the 50s
Have not
and
turned
60s.
over, yeah.
It's a long time.
So, yeah.
That was my sense of it. Okay,
All right. Good stuff.
all right, let's move
All right.
to
Well-
item 3, future
Wait,
agenda
before we go
items. Oh,
forward,
I'm sorry.
I just want to give you the 30-second plug on where this is going to be going now. Now I'm going to reach out to the property owners for North Montgomery and get their sense and give them kind of an update on where this piece is going. Because this is kind of how it has a life of its own. The South Fulton piece, I'm not seeing a whole lot of legs on it from the community standpoint, kind of what we were hearing tonight. And even in the sense of some of the research that I was doing, it just doesn't have that squishy feeling like, oh yes, this totally makes sense for the following reasons. There seems to be more cons that are not to the benefit of the community as a whole than there are pros. The non-conforming piece is always something that's going to be rearing its ugly head, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can't continue to operate as is. They can keep doing that.
You can maintain, that is, you can maintain a single-family residence in a commercial manufacturing zone by right.
By right. Yes.
Okay.
As long as you maintain.
So it isn't that kind of a
But
restriction on
if
the
it goes
owners.
vacant, then that becomes an issue. And we've seen that 180 days if we,
Yeah.
if we
What,
can
what do we
verify that.
know about the school district and the development of their parcel on the other side of Montgomery?
that's not on tonight's agenda. I cannot speak to that.
Right.
The school
No, I
district
mean, that
has a
could be-
I get what
parcel-
you're saying.
Oh, on
but that is not
Montgomery.
a direction that I can go tonight. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm
Not
just,
on the agenda, he
Yeah, I
said.
think the attorney agrees with me.
we could polish this thing and make it perfect, and then have the Ojai Unified School District do something with the other side of the eastern side of the street, or the northern side of the street, eastern side of the street.
Oh,
They could-
across the street from
across
Mr. Kuhn.
Right, exactly. Well, no, not exactly.
Yes,
Yes.
across Aliso
Right,
from his
right, across
property.
Lisa,
On
yeah.
the south side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I don't want to
Yeah.
let's squash it, but I appreciate the question. I just can't respond to it.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay,
Okay.
So you guys know where this is going next. And what's the next item?
future agenda items, number 3.
All right.
It looks like there's no cases ready for deliberation 2 weeks hence.
No, but I see something coming forward as a concept review in October. So we're gearing up for that right now as we speak. So you,
107 North Ventura.
yes,
I'll
that
stop.
is World University.
Oh, no way.
So,
Okay,
but
It-
not owned by the same individuals. So you'll get to see a wonderful
not
owned
owned.
by the. So when this came forward to you a few years back,
Yeah. Different now.
different owners now.
Interesting.
Oh, yes, right, yes. I got a tour of that property from Jeremy McBride, who's one of the
So
El Roblar folks.
pause that. I
Yeah.
look forward to you saying that during your
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry, say that again.
That's,
ex parte.
I will have an ex parte contact to reveal when that comes up.
Okay. But to be fair, September 18th, I'm not seeing anything. And so
change, or is this?
I would say let's wait till the end of the week, and I'll have a conversation with the chair, and at that point we'll make the call. I would say,
We typically have a conversation a week before the meeting anyway,
yeah.
prior to the noticing and the books and all of that, just
This
to-
one I'd say let's leave
sort it
open on the chance that something is ready to go, at least for a discussion. I don't anticipate it, but you just never know.
Might
I'm
happen,
being
yeah.
pulled in a lot of different directions, so it's difficult to say yes or no to some of those
And you
things.
have a 72-hour fuse on notifying of a cancellation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So we gotta do it by Friday. That Friday.
That's the Friday before, yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Okay,
All right.
all right. I know that I heard, I have not observed, Councilmember Lang, who is our liaison.
She's online.
She has her hand raised too.
Oh, she does. Nice.
I
You
don't.
can't see it here,
oh.
but I can see it on my screen.
Oh, whoa, okay.
Sorry, I've got some
Well,
technology over here.
We'll get to that in a moment. There's a director's report. Anything else you wish to add?
No, not at this point. No.
Okay, any council members, or, excuse me, commission members have something to report?
Good.
All right, then let's hear from our city council liaison. Ms. Lang? Aha! You have appeared
Hello,
on our
everyone.
screen.
I just wanted to let you know I've been here listening to the conversation, and I'm sure this is something that we will continue to discuss. And I really appreciated hearing your thoughts, and I just want to thank you for considering all of the very many layered aspects to these decisions and to this topic. And also give Lucas, just give you a huge thank you for all your hard work on this. And yeah, I'm sorry I can't be there in person with you today, but I will be there next time. So I look forward to seeing you again in just a couple of weeks.
Well, we're glad you were here to the extent you were and
Yes.
appreciate your interest. Yeah,
All right. Thank you very much.
okay. There being no other obvious business before the commission, at 8:27, we're adjourned.